know that I get to spend a week of my summer every year being a counselor at a leadership camp for high school students. And there are a lot of things about it that keep me going back every year. Number one, I get the chance to be a part of a community of people that's different than my Brookview family. It's not a Christian thing. These are just some of the lady staff members. It's a camp for high school students who are ASB officers and leaders chosen to represent their high schools from all over the state of Washington. And I've been going for over 20 years. And so the friendships that have been established are really, really special to me. Another reason that I love it there is that I feel like it keeps me young. I kid you not, 2 years ago, I got hit on by a high school student. Is that amazing? He's like, so, and I was like, oh no, I know what's happening here, and this is not going to go well for you. He's like, what school do you go to? I'm like, oh, I'm not really in school. And he's like, oh, playing it cool. You're one of those junior counselors, which they have just graduated from high school or in their first or second year of college. I'm like, no, actually, I'm a senior counselor. And he's like, oh, cool, right on. I mean, it was awkward, and I was like, well, I have to go just to help him get out of the whole situation. So it keeps me young. It's fun to be connected to young people and really kind of feel like I have a week to pour into their lives doing something different than I do other weeks of the year. So this morning, we're going to do something together that we do at leadership camp. You ready for this? Imagine for a minute that you are one of about 350 plus students crammed into a space that's about as big as this. How many of you remember pep assemblies in high school? Yeah? Take yourself back to that. One of the subjects that we talk about at camp is school assemblies. And we give school leaders ideas for their assemblies called crowd involvement pieces. Okay? Now, crowd involvement pieces in your assembly, they get away from just a couple of the popular kids getting called to the gym floor and performing games or doing competitions in front of the whole school, and it makes it so that everyone in the gym gets to be engaged. So, this idea for getting everyone involved. So you're going to be involved this morning. There's a picture there. This is the game or activity that we're going to be doing. Do you see how enthusiastic those people are? I'm hoping you will be the same. All right. Here's how this is going to work. When I throw out a question, I want you to stand up enthusiastically and say, again, very enthusiastically, that's me. See those people with their hands in the air? They're like, that's me, all right? And then you can sit down, all right? Cool? Yeah? All right, cool. I get some nods. That's awesome. Really secretly, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Pep assembly? I have to go back to high school? Are you kidding me? Okay, humor me here. Stand up if you have brown hair. Nice. All right, stand up if you have blue eyes. Stand up if you are a male. Stand up if you are a female. I like the pitch. Stand up if you drive a van. Yeah. Stand up if you don't drive. Stand up if you like country music. Yeah. Stand up if you have ever been to Disneyland. Stand up if you have never been to Disneyland. Oh, I see some sponsorships in the works. Stand up if you had your coffee this morning. Yeah. Stand up if you didn't eat breakfast. Stand up if you're in high school. Yeah. Stand up if you're in middle school. Yeah, that's me. Stand up if you are a parent of a preschooler. Or infants. Preschoolers, infants. Yes, that is you, Christy. Yep. Parents of elementary-aged kids. Yeah. Parents of teenagers. That's me. Parents of adult children. And for this last one, stay standing. Stand up if you are in a family. Look around while you're standing. All right, have a seat. So that was a really long way of introducing this idea that sometimes we hear a message on parenting, and sometimes we might wonder, what on earth does this have to do with me? But here's the deal. We are all as affected by family as we are by anything else in the world. When we go to the story of our lives and we talk about our attitudes, we talk about our dysfunctions, when we talk about positive characteristics that we have, more than likely, they're connected to the people that we grew up with, the people that loved us in the family that was around us. We've all been affected by family. Family, regardless of your stage of life, is a really powerful thing. So we're in this series called Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. And the reason that I chose that title is because it's from a book by the same name. So if you like what you're hearing about these last 2 weeks and again next week, you can pick up the book because there's a lot of great stuff in it, stuff that I won't be able to cover in our time together. And last week we talked about the idea of letting go of our perfect picture of family and allowing God to come in and to write a better story with our lives and in our families. And next week we're going to be talking about fighting for our kids' hearts. So we'll kind of narrow in and zero in on communication, discipline, and expressing love to the people around you. So for today's topic, we're going to be opening up the book of Deuteronomy and read one of what I think may be one of the most referenced passages for parenting, and it's a good one. So let me set it up a little bit. After going on an incredible journey with the nation of Israel, Moses, their leader, is essentially on his deathbed. And he has one more chance to remind his Israelite family of where they've been, of where they're going, and to kind of drive into their consciousness the stuff that really matters. So that's what the book of Deuteronomy is. It's Moses' last sermon to the nation of Israel, his people, his family, as they head into the promised land, knowing that he's not going to be going into that land with them. So Deuteronomy 6, verse 1 through 12 is where I'll read from this morning. These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant, then, when you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Moses begins this passage by reminding Israel about the center of their faith. He says, "Hear, O Israel, listen, don't forget this. The Lord, our God, the Lord is one." Moses said, everything I've said and everything that I will say, it hinges on one essential truth that trumps everything else. Our God is God. So everything is really about God, or at least it should be. And if we apply this to our role as parents, this should be the center of our focus as well. Our God is God. There's no other person or thing that should be our center, just God. So if in our goals as parents, we start with God as center, or we don't start with God as center, it's possible that we could end up focusing our priorities on things that, when it's all said and done, aren't actually the most important thing. God is God. Here's what this looks like for me. As a parent of these 3 kids, one of the things that I long for is that they would see and know deep down that God's real, that he is center, that everything is and should be about him. I want for them to leave our home having a relationship with the God who loves and cares about them and has great plans for their lives if they would surrender themselves to him. I want so badly for them to be connected to him. I want his joy and his pleasure to be the driving force in their lives. And since that's my hope and the end goal, parenting can't simply be about enjoying my children. It's not just about keeping them safe. It's not just about making them happy and comfortable. It's about connecting them to the one who will make them come alive. And the reality is, sometimes I need to remind myself that what I give to my children or what I do for my kids is not as important as what I leave in them. But oftentimes, it's really natural. It's really natural for me to slip into this mindset that the end goal of the parenting journey is to make my kids happy with me. Because actually, here's a newsflash, kids. Your parents don't like saying no to you. I like my kids to be happy with me. I don't like being the meanie that's wrecking all of their plans. There are moments, I think, as parents, so I think we can kind of see this type of parenting all around us. I call it the happy kid parenting style, right? There's moments where parents will buy anything, do anything, go anywhere if it would just make their kids happy. Because things sometimes are just easier when everyone is happy. We don't like it when people are in a bad mood. We don't like it with our spouses, and we don't like it with our kids. And heaven forbid they be unhappy with me. Now, I don't want them to be spoiled. I just want them to be happy. And this pursuit of happiness and success, at some point, we can cross a line. And it's hard to tell where that line is because it's not always obvious in the moment. But I know that I've crossed it before. I have. In my pursuit of what I thought would make my kids happy and successful, I threatened what would make them come alive. See, I think whenever we define a child's happiness and success in life as our ultimate goal, we settle for something far less significant than what God has designed for them or what he's designed them for. Moses offered a vision of a life well lived with one phrase that establishes a frame of reference for everything. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Now, the reality is, I can't make the choice for them that the Lord would be their God. But I do think that there are some ways that I can parent with that end in mind. So how do I lead them with the Lord our God, the Lord is one, as the driving force in what I do? I think that the traditional kind of American way of doing family, when we think about the spiritual development of our kids and connecting them to God, we think if I want my kids to know about God, I need to bring them to church. And that's good. That's really good. It is an awesome starting place and an important thing in their lives. And let me just say, from the church to you as parents, we care about your kids. We are doing all that we know to do to teach your kids this central message that God is real and he wants to be involved in their lives. He is center. So keep coming to church. Keep bringing your kids here. It's an important part of their spiritual development. But it's not the only thing. I have this illustration. Oh, I painted these. They're stuck together. This is going to be cooler. All right. So the church, all right, or really any organization that invests in your kid will only have a limited number of hours. Represents an hour in a given year to influence your kids. Research says that the average number of hours that a church has to impact the life of a child is about 40 hours in a given year. 40 of these marbles here. So if you're able to schedule your vacations, your sporting events, your holidays, your illnesses, so that you're only missing 12 Sundays every year, Brookview would have about 40 hours to influence your child or your teenager. We have 40. We have 40 hours to tell them everything they need to know about forgiveness, about grace, everything they need to know about a God, who God is, and how they can find their identity in him, and all that really important stuff. And I really believe that these 40 hours are really significant. They're significant. They're a big deal. But these 40 hours actually aren't the whole picture. If the church has about 40 hours to impact the life of a young person, guess how many hours you as a family have? I'll show you here. 3,000. Here's the difference. Church. Family. If I was a business person looking at that scenario, and in terms of influence, it wouldn't make sense to only leverage this in the life of a teenager or a kid. Doesn't make sense to only use that. My best effort at leveraging this kind of influence would get me very limited potential in their lives. So when we think about our kids' spiritual development, we can't just think about the Sunday morning church experience as being the only factor in their building their spiritual foundation. For the best chance at seeing our kids walk with God and develop a relationship with him, what happens in the home is really important too. No one has more potential to influence the heart of a child than a parent. Say it again. No one has more potential to influence the life of a child than a parent. It's just kind of the way that family is designed, that our kids will be more influenced by us morally, spiritually, emotionally than anyone else. And as important as this church is, and as important as the other relationships will be in the life of your child, it's critical to understand that your relationship with your kids and that dynamic of home and family is very, very powerful. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 6, starting verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. Moses says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and that these commandments should be in your heart. See, Moses is setting up the adult population of Israel to understand how to pass their faith on to the next generation, first he establishes God as the cornerstone of their identity. He's central to their lives. And then next, he challenges them to pursue a love relationship with God as the basis for how they live. And then he reminds them that these things have to be in their hearts before they can hand them off to their children. The basic principle is this: it has to be in you before it can be in them. Before I ask who my children are becoming, I have to examine, who am I becoming? Faith needs to be personal in my life, and it needs to be personal in your life. And you need to set yourself up in places where that can be true. What are you doing to cultivate a relationship with God? And maybe that's your step of action today. Maybe you would take the risk of joining a life group where people get together every week to talk about God and what he's up to in their lives, and to challenge you and to grow together. And maybe at first it's freaky and you just go and you want to listen and you want to hear other people's stories, and that's cool. You should do it. Or maybe you want to get involved in serving other people. Maybe you want to start to pray and talk to God. There's lots of different ways to begin to pursue a relationship with him. And we might think, this is really scary. The idea that in order to influence my child spiritually, faith needs to be personal in my life, that's scary. And maybe you're thinking, my faith is not quite strong enough. My character isn't as spotless as it should be. This makes me nervous because I have quirky issues and I don't want my kids to see that. But like we talked about last week, this is an opportunity for us to put down the perfect picture image of who we think that we should be and surrender to God for a better story. One where we give our kids a front row seat to God at work in our lives. The sobering fact is that as parents, we will have influence on our children. It can be negative or positive, but we will have influence on our kids. How I pursue God, how I love my husband, how I treat the people around me, how I respond to authority in my life, how I spend money, how I work, how I communicate, it will all affect their values and their perspectives in life. And the dilemma for us as parents is that we don't have the margin or the luxury to get all of those things right before we start parenting, right? We don't get to be perfect before we start to be parents. The reality is, I think it's okay for my kids to see who I really am, especially if I want them to see the difference that God is making in my life. See, we don't need to live a perfect example or model. Moses wasn't saying that they couldn't pass on their faith until they obeyed all of the commandments perfectly. He was saying that these truths need to be upon their hearts. It's about desire. It's about passion. Everything doesn't have to be right in you or about you before you can have a positive influence in your kids' lives. So we need to make it personal. Letting our kids see our faith in action. Let them see us value spiritual growth in our lives. And let them see us, watch us put ourselves in places where we can be challenged, where we can learn, and where we can grow. Did I mention that we have life groups? You see, our kids already have a front row seat to our lives. The question is, what are they watching? Is it a show? Is it just a show? Or is it a real-life adventure where they see courage, where they see passion to overcome personal obstacles? Do they see what it's like to pursue a better relationship with God? Do they see what a committed, loving marriage looks like? Do they see a life that prioritizes Jesus above anything else? Yikes! My own message is convicting me because I need to be better at this. I want to be better at this. I want to be better because it matters. It matters. Moms and dads, our kids need to see us struggle with answers, to face our weaknesses head on, to deal with real problems, to admit when we're wrong, to fight for our marriages, to resolve personal conflict with the people around us. Don't forget this. God is writing a story in your life. And it's a story of redemption and restoration. And one of the most powerful things that kids can see is God at work in the lives of their parents. I want to give you a second principle. The second may seem like I'm contradicting the first one about no one can influence the life of a child more than a parent. On the one hand, it's true. No one has more potential to influence the heart of a child than a parent. But there's a second half of that truth. A parent is not the only influence that a child needs. So parents have this unbelievable potential to influence a child. And yet at the same time, as a child moves through the stages of life, as they move toward independence, other adults in their lives become as important, if not more important, at different stages than even the parent. I've observed quite a few teenagers, including my own kids. And from the time they hit middle school, they kind of start moving away from home. They're not doing anything wrong. It's just the way they're wired. It's how it works. And they're becoming independent, and they begin redefining themselves through the eyes of other people who are not in our immediate family. So the older that they get, the more important it is for them to have other voices in their lives saying the same things that we say, but maybe in a different way. So as parents, we need to be wise about widening our family circles. And as a church, we need to boldly step into that circle as it gets bigger. Let's go back to Deuteronomy 6. There's something right at the beginning that's really easy to read and just kind of skip over and not to think about its context. It's found at the beginning of verse 4. Here it is. Hear, O Israel. It's in the context of this phrase, hear, O Israel, that I want to spend some time talking and thinking about the context. Since so much of what Moses is saying in this passage include words like children and house, it's kind of natural for us to just sort of skip over and the hear, O Israel, and think he's talking to parents. But in reality, Moses was speaking to all of Israel. All of Israel. I read this from an article from the Fuller Youth Institute. A family in the Old Testament would have included parents, children, workers, perhaps adult siblings with their own spouses and children. In fact, households could be compiled of as many as 80 people. 80 people. In fact, this text is discussing the communal raising of children. Our own cultural distance from this passage may cause us to put undue pressure on parents alone. So in this passage, when we stop and think about it, the reality is that Moses is speaking to everyone there about the importance of passing on their faith to the next generation. And as important as the monologue was for parents, it wasn't just for them. Here's the idea that I'm trying to get at. Parents, the issue of your kids' relationship with God is not your concern alone. Right? You're not alone in your effort, nor should you try to do this alone. And if you are part of this family called Brookview, one of the awesome things that we get to do together is to provide community for our kids. All kids are our kids. As a parent, I want my sweet little Brooklyn and my teenagers, Kate and Cam, to know that church is a place where they can show up and they can be safe. A place where they can have meaningful dialogue with other trusted adults. A place where they can ask tough questions. So that's what I'm looking for in a church as a parent. But I also have another hat that I wear here at Brookview, and that's one of the children and family coordinator here. And I want you to know that I will do everything I know to do to help facilitate this idea of being a community who raises kids together. So when it comes to programming, when it comes to investing in your kids, that is my commitment to you. We're going to do everything we know to do as a ministry team to make church a place where your kids can show up and be safe, where they can have meaningful dialogue with other trusted adults, and where it's a place where they can ask tough questions. It's incredibly important to create a wider circle of other adults in the lives of your kids. And it's also incredibly important as a church to recognize that we have a critical role to play in the lives of the young people around us here. It's really powerful to me to imagine our church and doing life together where everyone feels responsible for the next generation. And these are our sons, and these are our daughters. And I see this happening around us. I see it, and it's cool. I see it in the way that we have a team of more than 50 volunteers who sacrifice their time and their Sunday mornings to teach in our kids' church programs and connect with kids. I see it in youth leaders giving up every Thursday night to connect with high school students. I see it in the way that our greeters acknowledge kids on their way in the door. And I could go on and on and on and on because it is all over the place here at Brookview. This is really an amazing community to be a part of, all right? Yeah? Don't stop. Don't stop being that. We need everyone's engagement to raise our village of kids. And to parents, I want to say we have to be intentional about widening the circle of influence in our kids' lives. Kids will seek out another adult's validation on their own. Or you as a parent can be part of the process and pursue strategic relationships for them. This is a story from this book, Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. The book's co-authored by a guy named Reggie Joyner, who is at the time of the story, he was the family life pastor at Andy Stanley's church in Georgia called North Point. Some of you are familiar with Andy Stanley. And then a guy named Carrie Newhoff, who is the senior pastor at a really big church. They have a bunch of different campuses in Christie, Canada. That's for you, yes. All right, so this is Reggie's story that I'm gonna read about here. When my son, Reggie Paul, turned 16, as father and son, we had always had a positive relationship, significant moments together, and lots of conversations about faith. He was integrally involved with our church. But somewhere during his second year of high school, things began to change. As he shifted toward a certain group of friends and became more independent, he and I were both taken by surprise at the strain that began to show up in our relationship. We were going through a real tug of war, and it was all connected to, you might guess, a girl he was dating. I remember thinking his years of experience with me as father would make him pay more attention to me than a girl he just met, but I was wrong. I couldn't compete. It all exploded one night when he came home past curfew and I walked into his room to confront him. I said, "You're late coming home from a date, and I just need to know what's going on." He replied, "Dad, I don't really want to talk to you about it." "Well, you don't have an option," I explained. I need you to tell me everything that went on tonight, and I need you to tell me now." He looked at me as if I were a stranger and said, "No, I'm not going to tell you that." Then I did something that came naturally. I said, "Reggie, this is me. You know I care about you. I need you to tell me what's going on because I'm your dad." Then he said something that caught me off guard. None of my children had ever said it before. It was gutsy. It was honest, but it shocked me. "No, you don't understand, Dad. I'm not going to tell you because you're my dad. You make the rules." I just wasn't ready for that response. I was flustered. I didn't know what to do. That night, I told my wife, Debbie, if he can't talk to me because I make the rules, then I'm not sure I want to make the rules anymore. The next day, I showed up at my friend Andy Stanley's office and said, I just don't understand. I'm trying to get my son to tell me what's going on. He won't tell me anything. Andy thought for a second, then with a twitch of sarcasm said to me, well, did you tell your father everything? I muttered, no, but what does that have to do with anything? The next day, I went back to Reggie Paul, and I said, Andy told me that you ought to tell me everything you're doing because that's what a good son would do. No, actually, that's not what I said. I said, I talked to Andy, and he said he didn't tell his father everything either, and I should understand why you won't tell me everything. I'm trying to be okay with that, but I do need to ask you a different question. I asked my son, if you won't tell me, then who will you tell? His response was easy. He said, that's fair. I'll tell you who. I'll talk to Kevin. As soon as he said Kevin's name, I felt a huge sense of relief because Kevin had been a family friend for years. I knew he loved our family. I knew he respected me and had the same values we had. I remember thinking that Kevin would be a very safe place to go. I knew then, more than ever before, what a gift it was for me to have this other adult in my son's life. I didn't worry about what Kevin would tell Reggie Paul because I knew he would be saying the same kinds of things that I would say. Now, as parents, maybe this story bothers you. Maybe it kind of bugs you. There's something inside of you that's like, actually, I really can be objective. But it might not be about what we think we will be. It's mostly about what our kids think we would be. The reality is that there are some moments in the life of my kids that I'm probably not going to be able to be as objective as I need to be or even as I can be because I'm their parent. Imagine this. Kate comes to me. By the way, both Caitlin and Cameron are serving in kids' church this morning, so I can go totally crazy with all of my stories, and it's all good, right? All right. Okay, so this is a hypothetical story. No joke, for real. This is not an ounce of truth in it, in my hypothetical story. Got that, kids? Amanda? Trevor, you got that? Not an ounce of truth here. All right, so imagine Kate comes to me. She'll be 16 in a couple of months. And for the sake of this story, let's say she's 16. She comes to me and says, Mom, I've been dating this guy for a while now, and things are getting kind of physical. And I know that there are boundaries that we need to have in our relationship, and I'm trying to figure out how to draw out those boundaries. And I want you to talk me through this so that I can make sure that I say the right things to him so he doesn't keep making moves on me that he's making. Now, on one hand, I really would like to think that she would come to me with something big like that, and that she's seen a pattern of me being honest with her about this stuff. But maybe that's not how she would feel. Maybe she won't come to me. Maybe she's thinking, based on my personal history of having a strong bias towards action, that instead I might say, babe, don't worry about it. I'll talk to him, and I will take care of it. Or even better, I'll tell Dad. He can take care of it. All right, so the reality is at that moment in her life, hypothetical as it might be, she might need someone with a different kind of objectivity to sit down with her and talk with her and help her sort this thing out. So what if you have a conversation with your teenage son or daughter, one where you ask, who are you going to talk to, honey? Who are you going to talk to? Would your kids have a name? Would they identify a trusted adult in their lives who would give them a safe place to wrestle with difficult issues and who has God at the center? Regardless of your stage of parenting, I can almost guarantee you this. A time will come when your children will want or maybe even need another adult in their lives besides you. So as we watch our kids invite other people in, here are a couple thoughts. First, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. Accept the fact that you won't always be the one that your kids run to. As a matter of fact, if you try too hard to be that person, you might be the one they run away from. Second, don't be too proud. Don't be too proud. I know this is hard. I think an element of this makes nearly every parent a little nervous. It does me. The idea that my kids will confide in someone else about what's going on in their heads, that's one thing. But the possibility that they might get honest about what's going on in our home or their perception of what's going on, it has the potential to be embarrassing to me personally. Even so, try to give your kids permission to express themselves in a safe place, even if it's a little awkward for you as a parent. Because it would be better for someone who cares about your family to have insider info than someone who doesn't. In this situation, we can choose to be more concerned about what our kids need than about how we look as parents. Okay, so how do we actually do this? How do we actually live this out? I think that each one of us needs to be creative, really. It's based on your own family. It's based on your kids' personalities, your time, finances. There are just a lot of factors at play. But I will tell you some of the ways that we've tried to be intentional about widening our circle in our kids' lives, and it's been a really cool thing for them and for us. And I think that my kids would say it's been cool too. Many of you know that our kids are totally into basketball, and they're pretty decent at it. Brooklyn too. I know I'm bragging, but I'm a parent. It's okay, right? Right? So both of our older kids, they play on these basketball teams that aren't right down the street from our house. And with groups that we lead in the evenings, getting them to and from practices has at times in different seasons been a real struggle for us. And on a couple of different occasions, we've needed help with rides for them. And we try to be strategic about who we ask. Jeff Satterthwaite spent a stretch of about 3 months taking both Caitlin and Cameron in different seasons to and from practices. And it was really cool because they had another adult to talk about life with. And Jeff was amazing about making a sacrifice to invest in them. And we're so grateful. We've intentionally asked different people to stay with our kids when we're out of town. Matt and Christy McDonald, they're awesome about playing board games with them and just being basically super cool. You know them, you know they're super cool. Andrea Beatty, before she was Mrs. Fan. My kids still remember how she took time to pray with them and have deep soul talks with them. Gabe Much and Alex Herbid watched them one time, and after that, Brooklyn's biggest hope and dream in life was for our family to own a Volkswagen bus. It was her all-time favorite vehicle that she's ever been carted around, and she was like, "Mommy, you can sleep in there. You can eat in there." So awesome. And then Michael Ward, he was awesome enough to take them to a place where the cool kids hang out, Beth's Cafe. I mean, for Cameron, who was 12 at the time, that was big stuff. This summer, we strategically invited people we highly respect and love to go on a family vacation with us. Connect with our kids. We try and make extended family a priority as much as possible. We've tried to look for opportunities for the kids to be with grandma and be with grandpa that are more than just babysitting. Things like sending one kid at a time so it's not overwhelming. Or maybe they can make a better investment in one or two kids than all three of them. So we're intentional about that. We send them to summer camps when it's possible, away from home. Figuring out how to navigate life. Brooklyn's going to go to her first 4 nights overnight in 2nd grade. Freaks me out a little bit because she's our baby. But I think it's good because we know that they share things in those arenas that they wouldn't maybe share with us. And it allows them to feel a sense of independence and a little bit of freedom that we can take back when they come home. Right now, Cameron's doing some one-on-one training for football with Casey Ellersick. And last spring, it was with a Mukilteo Young Life guy. And the training is to help him with football, but in my mind, it is much less about football, and it's much more about a positive role model in Cameron's life. We try to bring our kids to the places where our church friends are gathering when it's appropriate. Rather than just having them stay home, because they're old enough to do that and hang out at home, we ask them to come along so that they can watch us hang out with people that love Jesus, and so that they can be with us while we're engaging in community, and they can watch that lived out in front of them. Now, we don't have all this stuff figured out. I don't have this all figured out. And these ideas certainly are not a checklist that you feel like that you need to follow at all. And I'm guessing that if we went around this room this morning, that a lot of you have really great ways that you're doing this too. I read about this cool thing in this book again, and this is by Carey, the other guy that authored this. And I just thought, I'm going to read it to you because it's cool. It's a cool idea. I always knew there was a passage into manhood that was supposed to take place, but I had no idea how it happened. My son Jordan and I talked about it, and when he turned 13, we set up what we refer to as his mentoring year. Early in the year, we sat down and selected 5 men in our relational circle that we both knew and felt comfortable with. I approached each man and explained what we were doing. The plan was fairly simple. I asked each mentor to spend 1 day with Jordan over the summer. Now, they could do whatever they wanted to do, and over the course of the day, I asked each mentor to impart 1 spiritual truth, something faith-based, and 1 life truth, good advice. I also checked calendars and made sure each mentor could make it to a dinner at my place after the summer was over. The mentors did different things. A few took Jordan camping, and another took him to work. My friend Chuck, who's a police chaplain, took him for a ride in a cruiser, and rumor has it, locked him up in a jail cell. My dad, who immigrated to Canada in 1959 as a teenager, took him through southwestern Ontario and showed him all the places he used to work as a young man trying to make his way in a new country. When the summer wrapped up, we gathered at our place. It was a great feast. We barbecued some steak, drank Coke, ate ice cream, and ensured there wasn't a salad in sight. It was, after all, a man's meal. Jordan had kept a journal over the summer, and after dinner, he spent some time telling each man what impacted him the most during their days together. Jordan presented each of the men with a Bible with the man's name inscribed on the cover. Each of the mentors then took a few minutes to make some remarks about Jordan and also reflected on some of the gifts that they saw at work in his life. After the men finished, we all gathered around Jordan and laid our hands on him. I read Deuteronomy 6:4-8 and spoke a few words into my son's life, and then we prayed together. Each man took his turn, and Jordan prayed as well. To say it was a powerful moment is an understatement. As we were wrapping up that night, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. So many of the guys there that night said, I wish someone had done that for me when I was 13. 5 years later, I'm still amazed at the power that experience carried. So it's really important for the church and for parents to partner together. If you go back to your story, I'd imagine that for most of us, there's a short list of people who influenced your faith and your character. If you could go back and redo your relationships as an adult, I'm guessing you'd probably add some more of some people in your life and take away some other ones. When I think about the positive influence I had growing up, I'm so thankful. I had numerous school teachers who invested in me. There were Sunday school teachers, youth leaders, parents, friends, and a boss when I was in high school. All these people contributed to who I am today by being there for me, investing in me, sometimes giving unsolicited advice, and mostly being there when I needed somebody to talk to. People influence us. Most of us can remember people who showed up at the right time and who became a needed voice in our lives to give us direction. Your children, your kids need someone in addition to you to believe in them. They need a place to belong besides home. someone to connect with besides the people that are supposed to love them. Pursue strategic relationships so that another adult voice will be speaking into your son or your daughter's life, saying the kinds of things that you would try and say as a parent. Whatever it takes as parents, whatever it takes, we need to become intentional about widening our circle. And if your kids are young, if you are one of those that stood up because my kids are preschoolers, don't wait. Don't wait. Start now. Start now. If we want to parent beyond our capacity, then we have to tap into the capacity of our church community. And as a church, we need to be there for our kids. God never intended life to be lived alone and in isolation. And what's true of us as individuals, it's also true of families. We have been called to live as part of a much wider circle and a God-designed community to help us all parent beyond our capacity. Again, I don't stand in front of you this morning with it all figured out, like not at all. But what I hope happened this morning is that you got some ideas and you heard some values and you thought about some concepts for you to consider and make you feel inspired and encouraged. Because this parenting thing, it's not easy. And I am so thankful that we don't have to do it alone. We have a God who loves us, gives us wisdom and grace, and we have this community. And I am so incredibly thankful to be a part of it. Let's pray.